Dr. Rangarajan here.
Dr. Rangarajan.
Hello.
Should I say hi?
I wish you a very, very happy birthday. It's a great honor to receive a medal after your name. I mean, I am immensely honored by this.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Now, Jagdish is not in online. Jagdish Bhagavati.
Yeah.
Yes. We recorded his speech the other day, and he said he will not be able to join at the hour of the function. So we'll play his recording. So he also conveys his regards to you, Dr. Rao. Jagdish Bhagavati also has conveyed his regards to you.
Jagdish Bhagavati has conveyed his regards to you. Jagdish Bhagavati has conveyed his regards to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So nice of you. So now we can begin, Bhanu.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So let me request Dr. Ramchandran, President of the TIES, to give the welcome address, and then Professor Panchamuki will take over the function.
Okay. Dr. Ramachandran, President of the Indian Econometric Society, would be delivering the welcome address. Please tell to Dr. Rao.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone, and good morning to Dr. C R Rao and those who are joining from the US. At the outset, on behalf of TIES and Base University, we would like to wish Professor C R Rao a very happy 101st birthday. We are here to celebrate the immense contributions made by Professor C R Rao in the fields of mathematical statistics, econometrics, and official statistics. One of the major contributions of Professor C R Rao is founding the Indian Econometric Society way back in 1960s. As a tribute to his contributions, the TIES Trust, under the leadership of Professor V.R. Panchamuki, has instituted Professor C R Rao Centenary Gold Medal Award for lifetime contributions made by the scholars from India and scholars of Indian origin. Professor Panchamuki would explain the details of the award a bit later. Today, we are here to present the inaugural awards, and we are blessed to have Professor C R Rao for this occasion. We warmly welcome you, sir, and we also welcome Ms. Teja Rao, daughter of Professor C R Rao.
Thank you.
This function is chaired by Professor V.R. Panchamuki, Chairman TIES Trust, and one of the strong pillars of the TIES. Today, it also happens to be his 85th birthday. On behalf of the society and the Base University, we wish a very happy birthday, sir, and welcome you to this function. The inaugural awardees of this prestigious medal are Dr. C Rangarajan and Dr. Jagdish Bhagavati, two very distinguished scholars in the field of economics and policy making. We welcome both of you, sir, for this event. We also welcome all the members of TIES Trust, Professor K. L. Krishna, Professor U. Shankar, Professor V. N. Pandit, Professor Dilip Nashne, Dr. R.B. Burman, and all past presidents, executive council, and life members of TIES, faculty members and students of Base University, other dignitaries, and media colleagues. I am sure you all will agree with me that this is one of the most important and emotional events in the annals of TIES to celebrate the contributions of its founder, Professor C R Rao. Once again, we welcome you all to this event, which is jointly hosted by TIES and Base University. And now I request Professor V.R. Panchamuki to continue the proceedings. Thank you, one and all. Over to Professor Panchamuki. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ramachandran, for the brief and succinct welcome address. And we feel proud and delighted and extremely excited that we are holding this unique function of awarding the C R Rao Centenary Gold Medal. You know, last year when the centenary was celebration throughout the world, so to say, and we thought that we owe a lot to Dr. C R Rao for his contributions to not only to the econometric profession as such, but also to the development of the ties. You know, as a founder member of the ties, along with various distinguished personalities like T. N. Srinivasan, K. Krishnamurthy, and Minhas and others, we found that Dr. C R Rao's contributions to the development of the ties has been unique and extremely distinguished. You know, throughout his part in the Indian Statistical Institute, he has been one of the unique, internationally known professors and academicians who has spent a lot of time in the country as a whole. Personally, I give a lot of importance and value to those who distinguish themselves on the global frame, but spend their time in India. I have Dr. Sukhumai Chakravarti as my icon. I have Dr. Rangarajan as my icon, and a number of others who have spent a lot of time in India contributing to the development of the academic environment of the India, and not only in the policy circles, but also in the academic circles. And so we value these contributions by the distinguished, internationally known distinguished scholars. Dr. C R Rao spent a number of years in developing the Indian Statistical Institute, the brainchild of Dr. Mahalanobis. After his contributions to the development of the so-called second plan model, and known as Mahalanobis model now, which laid the foundations for planning and the approach of quantitative analysis to the issues of decision making. Dr. Mahalanobis founded the Indian Statistical Institute, and Dr. C R Rao was the distinguished professor there for a number of decades. And as such, he made a lot of contribution to the academic world. Even now, we find that he has taken a lot of pleasure, initiative, and interest in developing the C R Rao Institute of Mathematical Statistics in Hyderabad. Even at this age, his roots, his mind, his heart are all stationed in India. And that is how we feel proud for them. So we thought after the centenary celebration that we should have something to express our gratitude, our gratefulness to the contributions made by C R Rao, because that is one of our Indian cultures, to express gratitude, to express our pleasure on those stalwarts, gurus who contribute to our development. And we discussed a lot both in the ties setup and earlier, and also with persons. The mentor, Dr. Rangarajan, is the mentor of the Indian Econometric Society. He is also the mentor for the Indian Economic Association. He is now the chairman for the Indian Economic Association Trust for Research and Development, for which Dr. Manmohan Singh was the chairman for 18 long years, and I happen to be the managing trustee. Now Dr. Rangarajan is the chairman, and our good friend Manu Murthy is the managing trustee of the Indian Economic Association Trust for Research and Development. So the contributions of Dr. Rangarajan in the development of institutions, in the development of the academic activities is, I should say, very unique and fundamental. And we discussed with all the people, and then we finally decided that we should have a C R Rao Centenary Gold Medal. And I think I may be wrong, I may not be wrong, that this is a unique gold medal established during the lifetime of the stalwart. We have got Mahalanobis Memorial Medal done by the Econometric Society since long time. We award to it for distinguished young scientists who are below the age of 45 and who make significant contributions. And a number of scholars who have received them below the age of 45 have excelled in life in their academic and non-academic pursuits. And we thought that we should have something for the lifetime achievement because it was the centenary celebration of Dr. C R Rao. Therefore, we finally concluded that we should have a C R Rao gold medal in recognition of the lifetime achievements of the distinguished scholars. Then we established the constitution of the award and the medal, and we decided what should be the size of the medal and what should be its scope. We decided that it should be similar to Mahalanobis model because C R Rao's contributions would not be any less than that of Dr. Mahalanobis in the statistical profession of India. I am too small a person to list the kind of contributions which Dr. Rao has made as a young professor, as a young teacher in the Bombay School of Economics, Department of Economics of Bombay. I used to teach econometrics, and the first thing that came to our mind was C R Rao's book on multivariate analysis, on the on C R Rao Kramer inequality, and many such things. I am not at all competent to list all of them, but the academic community and the distinguished profession knows about it. And this is not the time for listing those achievements because he is like a sun or a moon in the sky of econometric profession. And as such, we can only draw our fingers towards him and derive inspiration from his intellectual pursuits. And we decided to have a centenary medal, gold medal, and we constituted a jury, and we called for nominations, and we pinned down to two distinguished personalities, namely Dr. Rangarajan. You are able to hear, Rangarajan? You are able to hear?
No, I'm able. Now I am okay. Yeah.
Ah, okay. Oh, we were able to pin down two distinguished names of the profession in the world, in the world as such, on the Indian scene particularly. Dr. Rangarajan, the distinguished scientist, statistician, economist, and whatnot, econometrician, who has made contributions to the academic and the policy world. Are you able to hear?
Not now.
Oh. Who has been able to make distinguished contributions to the academic world and to the policy world in equal measure. He was professor in the Institute of Management in Ahmedabad for a large number of years and distinguished himself as a very outright and thinking professor on the management scene, and his contributions to a number of issues of management are well known. And subsequently, he came to the mainstream of policy making as Governor Reserve Bank, and later on, the life is full of contributions to the policy world and the academic world. And then Professor Bhagavati is known for his contributions to the field of international trade, right from his days of very seminal article on imagerized growth and subsequently on trade policies, on effective rates of protection, domestic resource cost, on distortions, on a number of issues. Later on, he became advisor to the WTO and was a champion for the openness of the economies. And he was for globalization all along. And I had the distinction of making certain academic papers, research papers on effective rates of protection jointly with Jagdish Bhagavati in those days, and on domestic resource cost with Jagdish Bhagavati and T.N. Srinivasan. So he is a distinguished professor with a number of awards, and also the award of Padma Vibhushan, which has been taken both by Dr. Rangarajan and by Jagdish Bhagavati. And one thing we should say that Bhagavati deserves Nobel Prize, but his student has got a Nobel Prize, Paul Krugman, and for his strategic trade policy issues. And Bhagavati takes pride that his student has got a Nobel Prize. And even today, he is active on various issues of trade and development. His seminal book on Indian economy, along with Padma Desai, and later on a book on Indian economy with T.N. Srinivasan, are still reading materials for students of economics over the years. You know, econometrics, as you know, is a combination of economics, statistics, and mathematics. Though Dr. C R Rao has made contributions in high-fly statistics, statistical methods, statistical tools, we consider him as an econometrician of great value. Economics provides theories, and contributions of persons like Jagdish, Bhagavati on economic theories, on development theories are immense, and which become the basis for statistical analysis. And Dr. Rangarajan has made contributions in the field of official statistics of no uncertain importance, no mean importance. He was the chairman of the National Statistical Commission when our statistical system, of which we feel very proud since long time, had taken a number of beatings and shortcomings. And Dr. Rangarajan covered all the aspects of the statistical system of India: organizational aspect, the statistics on industrial statistics, monetary and financial statistics, trade statistics, and price statistics. On all of them, he went through very comprehensive commission report is there for the benefit of the government of India and all the academicians. I had the privilege of being a member of that National Statistical Commission, and I looked after the production statistics and trade statistics and price statistics. His way of conducting the meetings were very unique. He would listen to everyone, and then he would give his own views on the subject. So in this way, his contribution, even now, he is very active in writing papers on policy issues almost once in a week in the newspapers, and thus makes the people aware of the academic and the distinguished foundations of policy making to be theory and methodology. So that is why we are very proud. Even at the age of 88, he is active, and he comes to the Madras School of Economics, of which he is the chairman, every now and then, and every day, almost, I'm sorry, every day, morning, 8 o'clock, he is in the Madras School of Economics, such a distinguished person. There is one statement in the Ishavasya Upanishad which says how man can live long. Kurvanneveha karmani jijivishet shatagum samaha evam tvai nanyatetosti na karma lipyate nare. It says that one who does his prescribed duty, academic or non-academic, in a very meticulous manner would always live longer. So, and Dr. C R Rao's centenary and now 101st year are the symbol of the seminal commitment to his duties, the academic profession and the profession as a teacher, and therefore he lives longer, and we wish and pray that he has many more returns of the day, and he would continue to guide us, inspire us and the youngster generation by his writings and by his presence. And similarly, Dr. Rangarajan is 89 years old, and Jagdish, Bhagavati is also 87 years old, and I happen to reach 85th year on this 1936 born 85th year. So I take pleasure in joining the octogenarian group and making my prayers and best wishes for Dr. C R Rao for having many more returns of the day. We welcome you, we greet you, sir, and I have pleasure in requesting Dr. C R Rao to say a few words. After we constituted this medal, I wrote in a letter to Dr. C R Rao. You know, even despite his his daughter and his son helped him to reply immediately, saying that he welcomes it. And I also asked him to be the first person to nominate the first awardees. And he said he modestly declined, saying that no, you constitute your own jury and TIES is the responsible organization and I go by what you decide. So actually he has now welcomed the choice of Dr. Rangarajan and Bhagavati and wrote to us a nice letter, and we feel honored and privileged that he has joined us personally, and I now request him to say a few words of blessings to not only to the TIES but also to the entire econometric profession, because his words would be carrying a lot of spiritual and physical weight on the minds of all of us. I welcome Dr. C R Rao once again and request him to say a few words. Dr. C R Rao.
I'm very happy to be attending this award ceremony today. I would firstly like to thank the Indian Econometric Society for establishing the C R Rao Centenary Gold Medal. It's a true honor and I am touched. It's very special. The first medals are being given to two friends whom I have known very closely, Dr. Rangarajan and Dr. Bhagavati. Congratulations to both of you and my best wishes. Thank you once again for this privilege.
Thank you. Could you hear that?
Yeah, we could hear. Is it over?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much for Dr. Rangarajan, for Dr. C R Rao, for your initial remarks and blessing both the awardees and blessing all of us for taking this initiative. We, as true Indians, we believe in the value of blessings, and you are almost like a Rajarshi, who has got combined both the academic excellence. You are the king in the academic world, and at the same time very disciplined in your personal life, like a rishi. And we honor you and we receive your blessings with great respect and dignity and honor. So I now request Dr. Manu Murthy to read out the citations, and then later on we will have the distinguished acceptance lectures by Dr. Rangarajan and by Bhagavati. Now, Manu Murthy.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir, and good evening, everybody. It's my pleasure to read out the citation for both the awardees. So first, Dr. Chakravarti Rangarajan, Prof C R Rao Centenary Gold Medal for the year 2020 is presented to Dr. C Rangarajan for his lifetime contributions to the field of applied quantitative economics and to strengthening of official statistics in the country. Dr. C Rangarajan is one of the leading economists of the country and has held various positions in the government as well as in leading academic institutions. To name a few, Dr. Rangarajan was 19th Governor of the Reserve Bank of India, Governor of Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu and Odisha, and Chairman of the 12th Central Finance Commission and Chairman of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister of India. Dr. Rangarajan's contributions to the field of Indian monetary economics, macroeconomic modeling, financial inclusion, fiscal policy, poverty estimates, and to official statistics is immense. By chairing various committees in these areas, Dr. C Rangarajan has made a mark in broader public policy sphere, which will be guiding the future policy for years to come. By chairing the National Statistical Commission, now widely known as Rangarajan Commission, Dr. Rangarajan has helped to revamp the whole statistical system in India by emphasizing high standards for official statistics. The Indian Econometric Society proudly presents the Professor C R Rao Centenary Gold Medal 2020 to Dr. C Rangarajan for his outstanding contributions to the field of quantitative economics and official statistics. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Bhanu Murthy, for making a very succinct, to summarize the contributions of stalwarts like Dr. Rangarajan in 1 or 2 paragraphs is not at all easy. And they are like sun, SUN sun, SON sun. And we will have to show to them but only by finger and not by describing what they are. Their contributions are great, and with these few words of introduction in the citation, the usual ceremony part of it, and we now request to reproduce the function of awarding the gold medal to Dr. Rangarajan, which was held 2 days ago, yesterday at Chennai, and both Dr. Ramachandran, President of the Indian Econometric Society, and Dr. Manu Murthy, the presently Vice Chancellor of the base university, Bhagavati School of Economics University, and also distinguished Secretary of the Indian Econometric Society, went there personally and made that presentation. We will now have the clippings of the video recording of that event.
On behalf of the Trust of Economics, we are both privileged in giving this short to Dr. Rangarajan.
Yes, sir, that ended.
Yeah, now we request Dr. Rangarajan to deliver his acceptance lecture.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so we request Dr. Rangarajan to deliver his acceptance lecture, and then we will have the program in relation to Jagdish Bhagavati after that. We are very keen. Dr. Rangarajan is known for his preparation for every speech. We invite him to inaugurate the Econometric Conference, Indian Economic Association's annual conference, any event. He comes highly prepared, very systematically arranged his thoughts, and makes them very eloquently presented to us. We look forward to his speech, acceptance speech on this special occasion, which is now internationally telecast in YouTube and known as an international event with the presence of Dr. C R Rao and with Dr. Rangarajan. I request Dr. Rangarajan to deliver his acceptance speech.
Professor C R Rao, Professor Panchamukhi, Professor Ramachandran, Professor Manu Murthy, and friends. I am deeply honored to receive this medal and award named after a living legend in statistics, Dr. C R Rao. It is given only to a few to shape the contours of a discipline. Dr. C R Rao is one among such select few. The distinguished American statistician Bradley Efron said, and I quote, "The first half of this century," he was talking of 20th century, "the first half of the century was a golden age of statistical theory, during which our field grew from an ad hoc origins similar to the current state of computer science, into a firmly grounded mathematical science. Men of the intellectual caliber of Fisher, Neyman, Pearson, Hotling, Wald, Kramer, and Rao were needed to bring statistical theory to maturity. As an economist, I must draw attention to the fact that many of C R Rao's writings had an impact on the econometric tools used by economists. Professor C R Rao has made fundamental contributions to all the four major stages of statistical modeling in economic science: specification, identification, estimation, and testing of hypotheses. I'm also happy that I am chairing this our honor with Professor Jagdish Bhagavati, an eminent trade theorist held in high esteem by the economics profession. Besides, he was one of the earliest economists, almost in the 1960s, to warn against the deleterious impact on Indian economy of excessive controls and licenses. It almost took us 3 decades more to put the economy on the right track. I am beholden to the Indian Econometric Society, Professor Panchmukhi, Professor Ramachandran, Professor Manu Murthy, and their colleagues for choosing me for this award. My grateful thanks to all of them. I thought I will take the opportunity that has been given to me this evening to say a few words on the current situation that we are all facing, not only in India, but all over the world because of the pandemic. The economic crisis that we are facing today is very unique. In recent memory, this is the first economic crisis that has been triggered by a non-economic factor, a pandemic. The impact of this pandemic has resulted in human tragedy as well as in the curtailment of economic activity. According to the most recent report, that 45 lakhs, that is 4.5 million people have died all over the world because of the pandemic. In India, the estimate is something like 4.4 lakhs of people, that is 440,000 people. Some people think that even this is an underestimate. 2 other countries, both Brazil and United States, have deaths more than this. Therefore, there is a human tragedy associated with it. Until recently, this pandemic, this infection, was one which had no vaccine and which had no direct drug to cure it. Fortunately, vaccines have come into have been discovered in the last 6 months, and the vaccination is going on. But the economic impact is because of the actions that have to be taken in order to prevent the spread of the virus. And that is most importantly, the lockdowns. The lockdowns resulted in the lack of mobility, the lack of movement of people and goods. And as a consequence, for example, the Indian economy contracted by 7.3% in 2021. Similarly, the decline, the contraction in the growth rate in UK was 9.8%, and in France it was 8.1%. The contraction in the United States is somewhat less, and perhaps China claims that it had no contraction at all. Therefore, the real problem is how to balance 2 conflicting objectives. This is what is very often described as life versus livelihood. If lockdowns are imposed relentlessly and continuously for a long time, yes, lives might be saved, but it will deprive the livelihood of a large number of people. Please remember that the number of people who were hit hard because of the pandemic in 2021 were the migrant labor and other vulnerable groups. We saw on the television screen and elsewhere lakhs and lakhs of people moving from one state to another state because they have been deprived of jobs. It almost looked like some of the scenes that one had seen at the time of partition. So the contraction of the Indian economy in the first quarter of 2021 was 24.4%. It's a very large contraction, followed up by a contraction of 7% in the quarter two. And there was some positive growth, small positive growth in quarter three and quarter four. Right now, there is some sign of recovery. In the first quarter, the growth rate is 20%. Normally speaking, one would have been immensely happy to look at a growth rate of 20%. But please remember that it came on top of a decline of 24% in the corresponding quarter of the previous year. In fact, to compensate for the 24.4% fall in the output last year, the growth rate should have been about 30% or more, because you are starting from a lower base. Therefore, while it is a good sign, there is really, as I say, miles to go. And my own estimate is that probably the expected rate of growth of 9.5% during the current year, which has been put out by the IMF and the Reserve Bank of India, may be achievable. I think it is because the first quarter there is a 20% rate of growth. The second quarter also it can be because there is a low base, because last year it declined by 7%. On quarter three and quarter four, one is not very sure. But taking all these factors into account, one could say that possibly that the growth rate of 9.5% during the current year can be achieved. But please remember, if you take the 2 years together, this only means a growth of 2.2% over 2 years at an annual growth rate of 1.1%. Actually, the loss in output in the 2 years from the trend rate is a dead loss. In fact, we need to grow much faster than what we would normally say. I will come back to that rate of growth. Even if you want 7% rate of growth, that will not be adequate to make up for the loss in the 2 years. Therefore, we need a much faster rate of growth in the economy, and we must lay the foundations for it. In the current year, fortunately, the government revenues are doing well, and therefore, what the government should do is really to increase the government expenditures to push consumption and investment. There is no need, because the revenues are better than indicated in the budget, that the budgeted fiscal deficit of 6.8% should be lowered. We can keep this fiscal deficit of 6.8% of the GDP, but push government expenditure so that both consumption and investment pick up. I will come back to the growth after referring to one other issue. With the arrival of 2021, we complete 30 years since the reforms were launched in 1991. 1991 is an important landmark in the post-independent economic history of the country. The country faced an acute economic crisis triggered by a severe balance of problem. But the crisis was converted into an opportunity to bring about fundamental changes in India's economic policy. Thus, the break with the past came in three important ways. First, we did away with the multitudes of licenses, permits, and controls that dominated the society, that dominated the economy. Barriers to entry and growth were removed. Second, there was a redefinition of the role of state. As somebody said, the less government, more market does not mean less government, but different government. Namely, what the government is required to do now is something different than what it was doing earlier. But some of the areas which were exclusively reserved for the state were also thrown open to the private sector. And thirdly, we moved away from the inward-looking import substitution policy and embraced the world trade and were willing to face the competition from outside. Please remember one thing. This is exactly the opposite of what we used to do whenever we faced the balance of payments crisis. Whenever we faced the balance of payments crisis prior to 1991, our action was to tighten the imports even more than we did before. And therefore, in a sense, we took a very fundamentally different approach. It was reflected not only in the trade policy, but it was also reflected in the exchange rate management. We first moved to a dual exchange rate system, and finally, when I was the governor in 1993, we moved away to a more or less market-determined exchange rate system, which did not preclude the RBI intervention, but essentially let the market normally decide what the exchange rate should be. Now, it is true, if you look at it, that the performance of the Indian economy in the post-liberalization period has been good, if you look at it from the point of view of growth. But let me also say that I just now mentioned about the balance of payments policy. In fact, India's balance of payments has never been stronger than what it was in after 1992-93. Except there were some hiccups in 2013 or something, but the reserves had increased so much that we need not go to any other body outside for support. In fact, we went to IMF in 1971, we went to IMF in 1981, we went to IMF in 1991, and that is why I used to say the 10-year each was avoided after 92-93. Now, looking at the growth rate, let me briefly summarize and also conclude very quickly that between 92-93 and 2000-2001, the average annual growth rate was 2.2%. Between 2001-2 and 2010-11, it was 7.6%. And from 2005-6 to from 2011-12 to 2019-20, it was 6.5%. In fact, the best performance came between 2005-6 and 2007-8, when the average annual rate of growth exceeded 9%. Even if you include 2008-9, which was the international financial crisis, and the next 2 years, the average rate of growth was more than 8%. In fact, this showed what the potential rate of growth of the Indian economy is. That we have the capability to achieve a rate of growth of 8 to 9% over a sustained period. In fact, if the growth rate had continued with the same trend beyond 2011-12, we would have an unqualified answer to the question what the impact of reforms are on growth. But unfortunately, after 2011-12, the economy started declining. And I think it is important to analyze very clearly what are the factors that have contributed to the decline in growth rate. I will not go into it in some great detail this evening, but part of it is cyclical. In all capitalist and quasi-capitalist economies, the economy starts growing, reaches a peak in terms of capacity utilization and investment rate, and then it starts declining. And there was a large credit boom also at that particular time. Perhaps the downturn could have been better handled, but at that time there were other factors operating in the society which could not make the government pay full attention. But later on also there were decisions like the demonetization, which are also provided a shock to the system. So there is, what I would like to say is that reforms do not automatically lead to growth. The most important point that happened was the investment rate fell down by more than 5 percentage points from 38%. And the incremental capital output ratio also increased, with the result the decline in the growth rate happened. Therefore, what is really required is we need reforms. And we would say, like what the economists normally say, it's a necessary condition, but not a sufficient condition. Reforms must be supplemented by efforts to nurture the investment climate. Normally speaking, I would say that reforms create a naturally favorable climate for investment. But nurturing the investment along with reforms is extremely important. And it is a combination of these two will give you the growth rate. Taking a few more minutes, one question that we'll ask is, where do we stand in relation to reforms? Reforms are needed. As I said, they are a necessary condition for growth. We had a paradigm shift in 1991. There is no need for a paradigm shift now. What we really need to do is to look at every sector of the economy, every subsector of the economy, and see what needs to be done in order to create a more competitive environment and improve the efficiency of that segment. And that should be the approach to reforms. In a sense, power sector, the financial system, governance, even agricultural marketing need reforms. Maybe under the shadow of a crisis, we were able to push reforms. But we need more discussion, more consultation before reforms are introduced. In fact, I sometimes think, as regards the agricultural marketing reforms, it has reached a point where the best approach should be for the center to say, let each state decide whether they want to adopt the reforms or not. This, I will say, will be a good example of experimental economics. We will then know which are the states which adopted these reforms. How did they perform, and how did the other states perform? In terms of introducing reforms, let me say, timing and sequencing are extremely important. In my opinion, labor reforms are better introduced when the economy is on the upswing. Then the opposition will be less, because they will be realizing that the economy is doing well, and the reforms suggested are useful. Therefore, timing, sequencing, consultation, all of that become extremely important. I would only say that as we stand now, there are going to be more issues. Climate change, environmental control, environmental improvement become issues. In fact, even in the financial system, the way in which the fintechs are growing, the uniqueness of banks itself is becoming a matter of question. And therefore, there are new issues that will come up. But I think, as I said earlier, reforms are needed and reforms need to be introduced, but with the objective of improving efficiency. Finally, that the pandemic has also created certain new issues. Equity has become an important issue against the background of the pandemic. We need higher growth, and that is important. Growth is the answer to many of our socio-economic problems. And we also need to remember, it was during the high growth phase, we were able to introduce the Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, extended food security, and expansion of other facilities and so on. High growth provides additional revenues to the government, and therefore, equity considerations can be taken care of. In my opinion, equity and growth, or equity and efficiency, should not be posed as opposing considerations. They must be weaved together to produce an acceptable pattern of development. Growth and equity are the two legs on which a nation must walk. Ignoring any one of them will make the country only limp along. Therefore, as I mentioned earlier, growth is vital, and we really need to do it. People talked about a couple of years ago about achieving or going to the level of $5 trillion economy. We have lost 2 years. We are back to where we were at the end of 2019-20. At the end of 2022, we will at the end of March 2022, we will be still $2.7 trillion. To get to $5 trillion, you need, under certain assumptions regarding exchange rate and so on, you need 5 to 6 years of sustained growth at 8%. Then only you will achieve it. Therefore, as I said, growth is the answer, and that's where we really need to focus upon, and focus on that growth should be supplemented by equity. Equity will remain a dream unless it is supported by growth spurred by reforms. In that sense, reforms, growth, and equity are interdependent. Once again, thank you very much for the honor you have done me today, and I wish Dr. Rao many, many more years of healthy life so that we all will benefit because of his knowledge. Once again, thanks to the Econometric Society for the honor you have done me today. Thank you. I can't hear. Can you?
You are muted, sir.
I thank Dr. Rangarajan for, as usual, brilliant, incisive, and perceptive lecture, and covering the main issues of policies and main issues of decision making of the present times. He is both analytically sound and policy wise very precise, and as such we cherish his contributions, his lectures, always in the Econometric Society annual functions, seminars, and also in the Economic Association conferences. He made a very significant point that growth is a strategic factor that will sustain us. And I may draw the attention of the group to one or two observations which I am very fond of making. One, the whole reforms process is considered to be started in 1991. But I am fond of continuously stating that it started way back in 1977-78, when we had tremendously good balance of payment situation, reserves position, good agricultural policy. That was the reforms driven by the profuseness, prosperity. And people thought that licensing has become redundant, quantitative restrictions are restrictive, are not allowing growth to come out fully. And earlier, when Bhagavati and myself pointed out that effective rate of protection is more than 1,000 in certain sectors, we pointed out that there is need for opening up and making the sectors come in competition with the global economy. That is how we argued the globalization and openness as the starting point for reforms in the late 60s, which Jagdish Bhagavati often says, and even now he is committed to the cause of globalization. But in 77-78, we argued that quantitative restrictions should be reduced, we should have equivalent tariffs, and equivalent tariffs should be phased down to become less tariffs compared to the equivalent tariffs also should be equal to the ASEAN economy tariffs and not more than that. That is how the process of, and then the report, famous Alexander Committee report, of which I was the member secretary and almost the writer of the report, so to say, argued that export subsidies also should be phased out in due course of time. But you know, the Indian economy policy regime, according to me, is known for its fits and starts. The reforms in 1991 ended by 1994-95. There was no second phase reforms, though there was a lot of debate on the second phase of reforms. Nothing took place in concrete terms in the financial sector or in the other fields where reforms were called for. There was a bottleneck, there was a political and psychological bottleneck which held the reforms process in control. And similarly, for the sake of 1977-78 reforms, the whole process ended in 1980-81. So that is why even now today, due to the various factors like pandemic, the so-called opening up of the economy and proposal to increase investment had faced tremendous problems. So Dr. Rangarajan has said very nicely, very correctly, that reforms are necessary conditions but are not sufficient for inducing investment in the economy. And lot more needs to be done to improve the timing, sequencing, and consultations in the process so that we get the reforms become meaningful and useful for the economy. Now, growth is important, but I draw the attention of the audience to the caveat which growth alone strategy had created in the late 70s when the UNDP report, thanks to Mahbubul Haq and company, had pointed out that 5 types of growth should be avoided. One is the jobless growth, and the growth, if it does not generate jobs, which often it happens, that growth is not required, howsoever high it could be. Then it's ruthless growth. If growth generates inequalities, Rangarajan has clearly pointed out that growth and equity have to be taken together. That is well taken, and growth, equity, and efficiency have to go together, and that may reduce the size of growth, but equity has to be honored. So ruthless growth means if growth generates inequities in the economies, that growth is not required. Then futureless growth. If growth generates environmental issues, futureless economy, then that growth is not required. Then another important aspect which growth is required is voiceless growth. If growth does not generate empowerment of women, deprived sections of the society, then that growth is not good. And similarly, finally, rootless growth. If growth generates destruction of the social, cultural, and other family lifestyle roots of the economy, that growth cannot be entertained. So like that, growth alone strategy has its own caveats and this one. And of course, the growth protagonists are aware of these and argue that supplementary policies should be taken to avoid these catastrophes of growth. And Dr. Rangarajan is right in pointing out that we need sustained high growth for next few years to realize the $5 trillion goal which we have cherished as the goal, which has become almost a nightmare now, is not possible due to the pandemic. We have not only lost 2 years, but also lost a number of foundations of the growth process. And he has rightly pointed out that the time is now a little riper for adopting certain investment-oriented policies. And we are, my observations are not as comments on what he has said, but as a chairman, I was required to make some observations. So that's why I have made, and I hope they will be taken in the right spirit. And I welcome Dr. Rangarajan for making very insightful lecture and incisive lecture as usual. As I said, he comes prepared and with thoughts and innovative suggestions for the policy world, and his contributions to the econometrics field are not only in terms of contribution to official statistics field, but also in terms of the academic and the thought processes of the policy making process. And therefore we welcome him. We thank him profusely for accepting the award made by us. And as he said, we all join hands in conveying our greetings and best wishes to Dr. C R Rao for many more happy returns. Thank you once again, Dr. Rangarajan. Our pranams to you. Now I call upon Dr. Manu Murthy to read the citation for Jagdish Bhagavati, and then we will have the acceptance lecture by Jagdish Bhagavati.
Thank you, sir. I'm reading the citation for Dr. Jagdish Bhagavati. Prof C R Rao Centenary Gold Medal for the year 2020 is presented to Dr. Jagdish Bhagavati for his lifetime contributions to the field of theoretical and applied quantitative economics. Dr. Jagdish Bhagavati is arguably the most prolific international economist of this generation. The great economist Paul Samuelson has described his era as the age of Bhagavati in the international trade. Professor Paul Krugman, winner of 2008 Nobel Prize in Economics for his work on new trade theory, has said that had he been on the Nobel Committee that year, he would have awarded the prize first to his teacher Jagdish Bhagavati for his really insightful work on world trade theory. A polymath, Dr. Bhagavati has made seminal contributions to diverse fields including immigration, climate change, development and political philosophy. His fulsome support to the students has made him a beloved people's professor and earned him 6 fellowships from them as a mark of their affection. Dr. Bhagavati's writings with late Dr. T. N. Srinivasan in support of India's economic reforms in the early 1990s has provided strong academic support to overall reform process that successfully tested time and various governments. As economic policy advisor to Arthur Dunkel, Dr. Bhagavati guided the design of the World Trade Organization, while his insightful policy writings greatly influenced the policies of Prime Ministers Dr. Manmohan Singh and Shri Narendra Modi. The Indian Econometric Society proudly presents the Prof C R Rao Centenary Gold Medal 2020 to Dr. Jagdish Bhagavati for his outstanding contributions to the fields of theoretical and applied quantitative economics. Thank you.
Yeah, I request Dr. Manu Murthy to show the gold medal to be awarded to Jagdish Bhagavati. I requested him whether he could suggest someone to take it on his behalf, but somehow that suggestion could not receive uh, the response which we expected. So we are showing the gold medal, and we'll make sure that it will reach him in right time in USA, or whenever he comes here, we will organize a small festive felicitation function and award the gold medal to him and make ourselves honored. You know, by making these awards, Econometric Society is feeling proud, is feeling honoring himself, is feeling as if it is honoring itself. It's not just that we have given honors, but we are feeling honoring ourselves in the process. So I now request Jagdish Bhagavati to deliver the acceptance lecture. He has sent the text of the lecture and has asked me to read it out. Now, due to technical reasons, the first two paragraphs, shall I read, Manu? Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. Due to technical reasons, the first 2-3 paragraphs could not be recorded because of the problems on our side, and he has sent us the text of it. I will first read out, and then we will reproduce the video recording which we have done in advance of Jagdish Bhagavati's lectures. We will be able to see him, his flamboyant and extremely delightful face on the video when we start presenting his recording. Now, it runs as follows. I am very happy to accept the prestigious C R Rao Centenary Gold Medal awarded by the Indian Econometric Society. It is a coveted honor which I cherish. I am aware that TIES was founded by Dr. C R Rao more than 5 decades ago. It is fitting, therefore, that the centenary is being celebrated by the TIES Trust and its distinguished chairman, Dr. B.R. Panchamukhi, my esteemed friend and long-standing collaborator on trade policy issues over the years. My compliments also to the other office bearers of the TIES for instituting this medal, and I am grateful that I have been chosen as its first recipient today. I am also delighted that I share this honor with my fellow recipient and friend, Dr. C Rangarajan. I should begin by saying that celebrating Dr. C R Rao on his 100th birthday, and now today on his 101st birthday, is what is colloquially called as no-brainer. In honoring this legendary figure, Dr. C R Rao, a giant in the field of mathematical statistics, we honor ourselves. But for me, the pleasure is more personal, for Dr. Rao played a central and critical role in facilitating my return to India from Oxford in the 1950s, and hence, as I explained below, in my professional career in India and internationally. Now I request Manu Murthy to play the video clippings of his recording.
Friends, celebrating Dr. C R Rao on his 100th birthday is what is colloquially called a no-brainer. In honoring this legendary figure, a giant in the field of mathematical statisticians, we honor ourselves. But for me, the pleasure is more personal. For Dr. Rao played a central role in my return from Oxford to India in late 1950s. And as I will explain in subsequent highlights of my professional career in India and abroad. It turned out that Professor Mahalanobis, whom many admirers called in friendly banter Professor Mahabaloni, was looking for a promising economist to add to his intellectual entourage. The added motive being that he wanted that economist to assist his brilliant physicist protege, Pitamba Pant, in the perspective planning division of the Planning Commission on its program to raise the bottom 30% of India's poor into a minimum standard of living, a phrase which Pitambar managed to familiarize all of us with. But when Professor Mahalanobis offered to take me back to India, I insisted that I would not take a bureaucratic assignment, but preferred to get a professorial appointment and then be loaned to Pitambar Pant to help with his important project. But then Professor Mahalanobis ran into a roadblock. The great world-class mathematical statisticians at ISI in Calcutta found that my scholarly accomplishments as an economist, while impressive for economics, fell short of the accomplishments of the world-renowned mathematical statisticians who had professorial appointments at ISI in Calcutta. This is where Dr. C R Rao came creatively onto the scene. He suggested that I could be made a professor in the Delhi branch of ISI and then loaned from there to work in the Planning Commission. This ingenious solution, worthy of a man of practical affairs, cleared the way for me to return to India as a professor at the ISI and to work on loan at the Planning Commission. This was in fact the beginning of the glory days at ISI in Delhi. I then brought, on same terms, the late T.N. Srinivasan, who was the favorite pupil of the great economist Yaling Koopmans at Yale, and also had studied at ISI. T.N., as we called him, was a superbly gifted mathematician who could invert matrices in his head. Our team then took off with Pitambar Pant and Dr. Rao as our common heroes. A few vignettes from that time may be worth recalling today. Since Rao is a common name shared by the multitude, like Patels and Mehtas and Shahs, I used to tell him that nonetheless, Dr. C R Rao was unique and could not be confused with other less distinguished Raos. By contrast, the brilliant economist Dr. V.K.R.V. Rao had to use 4 letters to set himself apart. In fact, we used to joke that Dr. V.K.R.V. Rao's friends called him Alphabet Rao and his enemies called him 4-letter Rao. And Dr. C R Rao greatly enjoyed this joke. Pitambar Pant used to reward us by taking us to see Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. This was a treat also for the famous economists who visited ISI. Ragnar Frisch, the Norwegian economist who shared the first Nobel Prize with Professor Jan Tinbergen from Netherlands, was apparently escorted to see Nehru by Dr. Rao. The result was most amusing. Frisch was unable to advise unless he had a national objective function that he would maximize with Indian constraints. This was the only way he could plan. So he spent all his time with Nehru, with the Prime Minister, mapping his objective function, asking him about how much income now he would give up for income later, how much income now he would give up for employment, and so on and so forth. So he was spending all his time, Ragnar Frisch, his time with the Prime Minister, mapping Prime Minister's objective function, without which Ragnar Frisch could not advise on economic policy. After this had gone on for some time, Nehru said, "I have another meeting." He then called in Dr. Rao and said, "Never bring that man to me again." But the real treat for me was when Kalecki, the left-wing Marxist Polish economist, visited us at ISI. He made one important observation, which would expose the destructive shallowness of pro-distribution, anti-growth economists, such as my distinguished Delhi school colleague Amartya Sen. Kaletsky told me memorably that the problem in India was that there were too few exploiters and too many exploited. That is to say, in his language, redistribution would give practically too little to the poor because there were so many of them, and it would in any case be neutralized as the poor increase in number. You had to use that phrase which we all know now, grow the economy. Growth would generate the resources for aiding the poor. And how would that happen? First, as he pointed out, it would pull up the poor into gainful employment. This might be called the direct effect of growth. Second, it would increase revenues at any given tax rate, which in turn can be used to provide education and health to the poor. And this is the indirect effect. The two together become a very powerful instrument for impacting on poverty in the country. So growth in that sense had always been dismissed by the leftists, who were, I won't mention any names again, but they always referred to as a trickle-down strategy. And this was absurd because the image which was actually developed was like a lot of rich people are at the dining table, and there are a lot of poor people along with some stray dogs underneath the table. And as these guys at the top of the table are munching the leg of lamb and the wonderful food, some crumbs would fall to the poor people below. So it was a sort of effect in the sense of a trickle down, meaning growth was simply the effect on the poor was a sideshow, and it was not really a central strategy. So I actually, having thought about this problem at great length in the ISI, where we were all working with Pitamba Pant and Dr. C R Rao and T.N. Srinivasan, etc., I said that in fact the way to think about growth was, because words do matter, as we know, and nowadays words do matter a lot, and I'll come back to that theme. To call growth a trickle-down strategy was a way to put it down. In fact, so I substituted for that the phrase pull-up strategy, that growth would pull up people into gainful employment and out of the poverty in which the bottom 30%, according to Pitamba Pant's statistics, were mired in poverty. So that changed the way one thought about growth from a trickle-down reactionary strategy to an activist strategy, where growth would be impacting on poverty in a profoundly important activist fashion. So the question then became, how do you actually accelerate growth? Because first you have to admit that growth was important. That was successfully done by people like us. But then we had to discuss how on earth to achieve this radical transformation where growth would in fact accelerate. Now, and this is where one of the central tenets was, we came up with the view, and this is something very much on the Indian scene today, that an open economy is more conducive to growth than a closed inward-looking one. This is something which is very hard to convince people, but it is there, very much so, in our own experience. And actually the Prime Minister, Manu Murthy, whom I had the pleasure of being with at St. John's College in Cambridge, He was my classmate. He was sent out because he was a poor man. He had to do masters, and then his vice chancellor in Chandigarh sent him out. So he was 1 year older, but he came 1 year later. But when he was at St. John's, he used to take a shower in the evening and sometimes at early morning, and he opened all the windows, and he was a sturdy, came from a peasant stock. We more middle class people like myself and Amartya Sen, etc., were closing windows, and Manmohan Singh was opening them because he really, was very much into this sturdy approach to the weather. And I knew at that time that this young man would become something. And of course, I had no idea that he would become the Prime Minister of India and would be implementing all the policies which he and I discussed all the time in Cambridge and then later on in Oxford. So he had the opportunity to implement the pro-growth strategy. And, it could have been in better hands. So the fact that openness was important was somewhat central to a pro-growth strategy. It was not just a matter of saying growth is good. That doesn't cut much ice. We have to say, how do we achieve that growth? How do we actually accelerate growth? And that is where the fact that an open economy is conducive to growth and a closed economy is not, was another central point that we really were very much involved in. And I think this is something that keeps coming up on the Indian scene right now. We know, as all of you must know, the notion that we must protect our own industry, no matter what the cost, keeps recurring again and again and again. The Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, came in from Gujarat state, where he actually was implementing policies regarding getting people to invest, cutting out red tape, and so on. But when he got to the center, what happened was he got captured, because at the center you've got bureaucrats in control. So this is what is called by, in Marxist language, the treason of the clerks. Anytime the Prime Minister would want to move in the direction of more openness, you will have a whole bunch of people who are basically schooled in the old-fashioned way and are against such openness and will in fact undermine the thing. And so this is known as the treason of the clerks, and it's very difficult for any prime minister, no matter how much conviction he has in favor of openness, to completely override the bureaucrats who are there and who are actually destroying this idea. At the same time, I think we also have the problem, which is that there are groups of people who actually repeatedly come out, saying trade is bad, trade is not good. And this is something which I would say, if you know the literature, if you know the scene, people graduating from the MIT Poverty Lab have been leading some of these retrograde ideas and pointing out that actually trade is bad. And the many graduates of Columbia, whose names are well known in the literature, they've come out against it. So there is in fact a debate on that. But the point is, when it comes to poverty, to people in the public domain, it's very hard to be spending time all the time countering the absurd claims of the openness people on the Indian scene. Now, this is where I think I must say that in India, the policy scene is also actually complicated because every now and then you will see large numbers of people signing little statements to the effect that trade is bad, all kinds of reactionary statements which undermine our policies and so on. And here I must say that I have one answer to it, because you have lots of people signing on to these things. And it reminds me of the time when one of my many distinguished students, Maury Opsfeld, who went on to become an extremely distinguished economist, he came in from math into my microeconomics course at MIT. And there I was putting down the box, the famous box diagram, which many of you in the audience will recognize. And there is the Edgeworth-Bowley locus, contract curve locus. So I was going on and singing the praises of the Edgeworth-Bowley locus. And so Maury Opswell, who had come in from math, he looks at me and he says, "You mean to say it took two guys to invent that?" And so I used that to basically go against all these round robins which come with 15, 20, 40 people signing on to these statements, with reactionary statements against good policies. And I say, recalling Maury Opswell, do you mean to say that it took 40 people to produce this? It drives them crazy, actually. They get very upset about it. But the only way to counter some of this rubbish is to actually ridicule it. And I think we need to do more and more of that. So I think in my view, I would just say one more thing before I conclude, which is that it is always a hassle to try and come out with good policies, particularly today, when anybody can take to the take to the public policy space. And it's very hard to continue fighting it. It gets tiresome after a while, but we have to do it. There's no way out. And in fact, this is something which we really in public policy space have to do it. In the old days, we could admire Professor Samuelson, Dr. C R Rao, the great scholars of the world, at whose feet we learned many things. Today, the scene is full of ideologues, people who have no understanding of scholarship, and we have to take them into account. There's no way out, absolutely. But hopefully there'll be more C R Raos in the future in our, and we will in fact have scholarship triumph over ideological rubbish. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jagdish Bhagavati, for your usual insightful lecture mixed with humor and very ironic statements, telling the essence of your thoughts to bring out. You have been always the champion of globalization, openness, and trade. And as we all know, I had the privilege of working with him on effective rates of protection in the late 60s and the early 70s. And we produced the estimates of effective rates of protection for the Indian economy, which was at that time very much battered by quantitative restrictions and licensing policies to which Dr. Rangarajan made reference. And our effective rates of protection for many industries came out as 1,000%, 2,000%. I was thinking that there is something wrong, but Jagdish had a very insightful look at these figures and was jumping with joy. That shows that the extent of distortion that exists in the Indian economy due to tariffs and non-tariff for licensing and quantitative restrictions. He jumped at concluding from these figures that quantitative restrictions have created a lot of distortion in the economy and hence a lot of inefficiency, and therefore they should be done away with. And subsequently, as I said, 77, 78 time during Alexander Committee report, we used these results to bring out the need for rationalizing the trade policy regime. I may mention that, as Dr. Rangarajan said, the seeds of reforms were sown in 1991, but the seeds for thinking for reforms started in 1977, 78, and but these were short-lived, and therefore the economy always suffers from ups and downs of the policy reforms that take place. And now Dr. Bhagavati said that there is need for openness even in the present system of pandemic, but I observe that the world is moving more towards inward orientation once again, import substitution. So the so-called catastrophes of opening up due to the Chinese invasion of the domestic economy with cheap products has caused a little alarm in the Indian policy system, and therefore we have evolved the policy of Atmanirbhar economy, Atmanirbhar policy, which ultimately means the same thing as import substitution, which we used to detest in the days of openness and export orientation as the basic foundations of strategy. So we are thankful to you for your very insightful acceptance lecture, and I request Dr. Manu Murthy to take over to make a few observations. Now you are there, na, Manu?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah. So we thank once again Dr. C R Rao for gracing the occasion, all the 2 hours of our program, and Dr. Rangarajan and Dr. Bhagavati for giving the acceptance lectures. Though it does not have the same effect as person-to-person meetings, but to have the pleasure of meeting all of you in the webinar, and I'm sure all the participants have enjoyed the presence, and we hope that the pandemic will soon end and will make all of us have the same approach of meeting and having personal interactions as in the past. And I'm sure we pray once again for a long life to Dr. C R Rao and for giving us this opportunity of constituting this gold medal and awarding to the scholars. Thank you, Dr. Rangarajan and Dr. Jagdish Bhagavati. Now, Manu Murthy.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. It's already almost 1 hour 45 minutes. I'll be very brief, and first of all, I would like to thank Professor C R Rao for gracing this occasion and blessing all of us. It's going to be a memorable event for us, and I would like to profusely thank Dr. C R Rao and also to Ms. Teja Rao and his son. Thank you so much for making this event possible, and thank you so much for providing all the support, background support for Professor C R Rao. So I once again thank the family members of the Dr. C R Rao for this event, and I would also like to thank both the awardees, Dr. C Rangarajan and Dr. Jagdish Bhagavati, for making a very inspiring acceptance lecture. As Professor Panchamuki said, I think these 2 talks would really revive the debate on the growth versus equity, or the kind of trade protectionist policy that India has been adopting for the past 3-4 years. So again, I would like to thank Dr. Rangarajan and Dr. Jagdish Bhagavati for making this, and our generation would definitely cherish these lectures for many years, and I think we would continue to follow the footsteps of these distinguished economists. I would like to thank Professor Panchamuki, who has been guiding us for the past almost more than a year and have been pushing us to undertake this event, as well as guiding this whole process of instituting the medal, and and the whole process of selection and all those things. And I thank you so much, sir, for all this support that you have been providing for the society, and especially for me. And you know that I keep calling you. In fact, other day I called you at 5:30 in the morning. So I found that you were online, so I could call you at 5:30 in the morning. So thank you so much for taking all my calls and helping us. I also like to thank my faculty members at the base, Bipin, Rajesh, Rafi, and our good friend Balu, for all the support that have been provided for this whole event. And finally, I would like to thank all the participants, those who are part of this. We will be uploading this video soon, so that those who had some technical problems, I'm sure they will like to have go through this video once again. So we will keep this.
Ramchandran, thank Ramchandran.
Yeah, I'll come to that. I would like to thank the office bearers of the TIES, especially Professor Ramachandran. I think Vice President Professor MP Bejborwa is also online, and the Treasurer Dr. Shanmugan is also there, and all the TIES Trust members. Again, because of them, we are here. The TIES Trust is basically a guiding light for the Indian Econometric Society, and I thank all of them for their support. And all my students, they're also participating here. Some of them are actually following this event through YouTube. So again, I'm sure they would have benefited a lot in today's event. So, and there is also some media people. Again, I thank them for being part of this important event of the Base University, as well as the Indian Econometric Society. Thank you once again. Thank you.
So now,
okay, thank you, Manu Murthy.
Yeah,
thank you. Right, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
With great pleasure, we close the program, and we are happy that it has concluded very successfully, smoothly. And I would like to thank Manu Murthy, Ramachandran, my good friend Balu, and Shanmugam, and all other colleagues. Taking names is not important, but profusely thanking him for their collective inputs to this exercise. My distinguished Managing Trustee Dr. Burman and Dr. K.L. Krishna has been always our guiding person, mentor, and we thank all of them for the successful event. And we once again convey our prayers to Dr. C R Rao for a very long, cherished, fruitful life. Thank you.
Thank you.